Hi everyone, my name is Kristen Curtis and I'm one of the registered dietitians here at the Villages Health. Today's topic is mindful eating. The objectives for today are to understand the correlation between mindful practices and stress reduction, weight loss, and lifestyle change, looking at the importance of self-awareness and behavior changes, understanding the barriers to development of self-regulatory skills, looking at the different benefits of food appreciation and food gratitude in relationship to healthy lifestyles, learn the benefits of mindful and intuitive eating, and then lastly, take part in a mindful eating exercise. So some questions to consider, and there's no right or wrong answer to these questions, but the first one, if you had to describe in one word, what does food mean to you? Take a minute and think about if you had to use one word, what food means to you. So some of the responses that we've gotten in previous conversations have been words like comfort or nourishment, nutrition, delicious, social. So again, what food means to us in one instance might not be that same answer the next time we ask ourselves the same question. Some other questions to consider: why do we eat? What dictates the food choices that we make? How can mindfulness promote a healthy relationship with food and self? And how can we promote positive food and nutrition messages? So these are some of the questions that we're going to address in today's topic. Comparing mindful versus mindless eating. So mindful eating means that we're eating with intention. We're trying to connect or reconnect with the experience of eating, and we're truly paying attention to the food choices we make and why we're making them. Versus mindless eating means we're eating or often overeating without really thinking about it and making unconscious decisions about what we eat. There's different cues, internal and external, that can influence our eating. So the internal cues, examples like no longer feeling hungry or the food no longer tastes good, versus external cues like your plate is empty, the TV show is over, or the people around you are done eating. So which type results in mindless eating, internal or external? The correct answer here is external, because we're not focusing on ourselves, we're not listening to our bodies. Rather, our plate is empty or the people around us are done eating. We're not really paying attention to the true experience of eating. There are some triggers to mindless eating. The first ones we're going to talk about are things like our sight, smells, and sounds. So as you look through some of these images here, I want you to think about the sight, smell, and sound of some of these things. So sizzling bacon is often one of them, where you can almost taste it. Another example, thinking about walking into the movie theater. Let's say that we had just gone out to lunch with our friends and we walk into the movie theater. We're clearly not hungry. We just finished our lunch, but we can hear that popcorn popping. We can smell the rich buttery flavor of the popcorn. And oftentimes just that experience of never going to the movies without getting that popcorn. Other triggers to eating mindlessly are being distracted. So I think we've all been guilty of this at some point or another, but things like watching TV, working, reading, or being on the phone while we're eating. A funny example here is that sad movies can actually be more fattening. So one research article showed that moviegoers ate 28% more popcorn when they watched a tragic story versus watching a comedy like Sweet Home Alabama. Clutter is another thing that can trigger mindless eating. It can increase stress and negative emotion, lead to being overstimulated or distracted, and create those feelings of anxiety, guilt, embarrassment, and frustration. An example here was when stressed out females were asked to wait for another person in a messy kitchen. They ate twice as many cookies compared to women in the same kitchen when it was organized. So thinking about this in your life, if you have things that are cluttering your kitchen, if you have excess materials on your counter, if you haven't maybe cleaned up the dishes from one meal before you start fixing the next, all of those could be contributing to your mindless eating. Portion sizes is a big one. So the average adult eats 92% of whatever they put on their plate. So many of us were brought up in that era of you don't waste food, that there's starving children in China and Africa or wherever it may be. And so oftentimes we eat at least that 92% of what we put on our plate. Even nutrition experts served themselves 31% more ice cream when they were given a larger bowl. So all of these things now, we expect these larger portions. Going into a restaurant, looking at the way recipes and cookbooks are designed, the wholesale clubs, beverage choices, all of these make us expect that larger portion. If we go through the drive-through at McDonald's and can get a sweet tea for $1, a large one or a small one, well, many people are going to get that larger option because it seems to be, well, a great deal. Same idea if you think about McDonald's and going through the drive-through and getting a regular sized hamburger, the kind that comes in a kid's meal. If you went somewhere like Beef O'Brady's and ordered a hamburger and they brought out a size like that, similar to the kid's size at McDonald's, we would be pretty disappointed, thinking that we're not getting our money's worth. So why mindful eating? So mindful eating is it's an emerging approach for healthy weight management. It encourages us to have more appreciation towards the food that we eat, having a more positive relationship, reducing those negative thoughts associated with food, the ideas of good foods and bad foods, have an improved relationship with our body, and it promotes appropriate caloric intake without restricting foods. So when someone tells you you can't ever have something or you can't ever go somewhere, it almost makes you want it even more, doesn't it? That's not the idea with mindfulness. Mindfulness creates that positive relationship, realizing that we can have and enjoy, but also appreciate our food. So, creating change. Mindfulness changes the way that you think. When you're mindful, you're aware. And when you're aware, you can change your actions. So, looking down at the bottom here at some of those words under mindful, things like being intuitive, a bite, a meal, aroma, hunger. All of these things are words that we should be thinking about. So being mindful changes the way that you think. When you're mindful, you're aware. So thinking of some of the areas in your life where you can create that change. So setting our intentions, some of these questions that we talked about, considering why we're making the choices that we are. So why do you eat? If you looked at this list here of why are we eating, is it to nourish your body, for energy, because you're hungry, to experience a certain taste in a social setting? Is it because you're bored or food is just available out of stress or emotion? Again, this answer might be different under different circumstances. But prior to engaging in a meal, we should be considering why we're eating. When are we eating? Are we eating because it's a certain time? You always eat breakfast at 8 and lunch at noon and dinner at 5. Is it because you're starting to feel those hunger cues? Is it an emotional trigger or is it out of habit? Why do we choose certain foods? Is it out of convenience, comfort, taste, pleasure, nutrition, cost? Again, we might make these choices, different ones at different times. I think we've all fallen into the convenience and the cost factor at some point or the other when you're going to the grocery store and you notice something is buy one get one, or you had made up your mind at a restaurant before you went there, but now they've told you the specials. So thinking about the cost or the convenience of that item instead of things like nutrition can come into play. How much do we eat? So again, many of us were brought up in the clear your plate club. The package size is something to consider, so something that is considered to be an individual serving size. Oftentimes that isn't the case. If we flip that over, it'll tell us there's more than one serving per container. Do we eat a certain amount out of habit? We're used to the way the food looks on our plate, so we dish ourselves that same amount every time, or we put the same amount of ice cream in our bowl in the evenings. Are we eating because of those hunger cues? Have we let ourselves get too hungry where we're going to overeat? So, fostering food appreciation means that we're letting go of the diet mentality. When I teach this class live, I always ask the group, how many of you have ever been on a diet? And 9 times out of 10, every hand in the room goes up. And then I ask the question, how many of you enjoy being on a diet? And no hands go up. So the idea of bad foods, there shouldn't be a bad food. Rather, thinking about how we can fit those foods in an appropriate way and still enjoy how we're eating and achieve our goals. So we should be eating when we're hungry and stopping when we're satisfied. So the key word there is satisfied, not when you're full, not when you're stuffed, but when you're satisfied. We should be honoring and nurturing emotions instead of feeding them. So if you're eating out of stress, if you're eating out of boredom or anxiety or happiness or sadness, really honoring and nurturing that emotion, thinking about why you're feeling how you're feeling and owning it instead of turning to food. Pausing to be grateful. So thinking about all of the foods and the choices that we have access to, and then appreciating your food and savoring each bite. So taking the time when your meal is presented to you to really look at it, look at the colors, the smell, the sights, the taste, the sounds, all of those things, which we're going to talk about here in a minute. So some simple strategies to be more mindful include using a 9-inch dinner plate. So if you have a tableware set that includes 3 plates, it's typically the middle-sized one. So a standard dinner plate is about 12 inches. When we use that 9-inch plate, visually it looks like we're getting more food on our plate. If we use that same amount of food and put it on a 12-inch plate, there's going to be some empty space. And that gives our brains that idea that you deserve to have more food or go back for seconds. Another thing you can do is to use smaller serving spoons. So if you think about a big pot of mashed potatoes on the stove and you use a tablespoon instead of a big serving spoon, you then have to be conscious about how many plops of mashed potatoes you're putting on your plate versus that 1 or 2 huge heaping scoops. Avoid watching television, reading, or being on the computer or phone. In other words, avoid being distracted when it's mealtime. Try to eat a piece of fruit before snacking. It might be all you need. Not letting yourself get too hungry. Eating vegetables and salads first. A reason for that is because of the fiber component. So when you have your fiber along with your fluids, that takes up more space and we're less likely to overeat. We want to avoid emotional eating while listening to our body and choosing the healthiest foods that we can without feeling deprived. So, in other words, you want to eat a piece of pizza, eat a piece of pizza. Don't push it down to the point where when you do allow yourself that pizza, you're going to eat the whole thing. A big piece of that, of course, is planning ahead. When you can plan your meals and snacks ahead of time, it helps us to be more mindful with our choices. So, engaging your senses to increase satisfaction. So our senses are those of touch, see, hearing, smell, and taste. So I have an activity here that we usually do live. So I'm going to give you a minute. If you have a piece of wrapped candy, particularly chocolate, like a Hershey Kiss in your house, I'd like you to go get it. Don't open it. If you don't have that, it can be anything. Just go grab something, ideally that comes in a small package or a wrapper. Okay, so hopefully you're able to grab something or you're on your way to. This little exercise we're going to do is going to help you focus your attention on the piece of food or chocolate that you have. So throughout this exercise, I want you to try to be in a calm and quiet environment. If you're somewhere that's really bright, dim the lights. So pretending that we have a piece of wrapped chocolate, which is what I usually do this exercise with. I'd like you to pick up your wrapped chocolate, but don't unwrap it yet. Place it in the palm of your hand and notice the colors and shapes on the package. Feel the weight of it in your hand. Pretend like you've never seen a wrapped chocolate bar before and examine it closely. Touch the packaging with your fingers and feel the texture. Pay attention to any sound the wrapper makes. Examine the wrapper, noticing all the colors. Look at the different sides of the chocolate wrapper and notice any place that the light reflects off the package. Are there any shadows? If your mind starts to wander and think about other things, that's okay. Notice the thoughts and bring your attention back to the chocolate. Now begin to slowly open the wrapper. Listen for the sounds of the wrapper tearing. Notice the movement of your hand, fingers, and arm muscles as you open the chocolate. You may hear other people or noises in the room. Notice the sounds, but bring your attention back to your piece of chocolate. Now raise the chocolate to your nose and smell. Slowly breathe in several times and focus on the different smells. Does smelling the chocolate trigger anything else in your body? Is your mouth watering? Are you having any thoughts like, hurry up and let me eat the chocolate? Why are you taking so long? If so, notice them and bring your attention back to smelling the chocolate. Now slowly take a small bite of the chocolate, but do not chew or swallow it. Notice the feeling and the taste of the chocolate in your mouth. How does it feel as it melts? Notice the taste and sensations of the chocolate on your tongue. Move the chocolate around in your mouth and try to notice the moment where you feel like you want to swallow. Now swallow the chocolate slowly, focusing on the sensations, noticing any lingering tastes or sensations. Okay, so how is this different from your normal way of eating chocolate? I always give a personal example here. The first time I taught this class, I went on my lunch hour over to Winn-Dixie to buy a bag of Hershey Kisses. I came back and I was mindlessly eating while I was working and finished my lunch and decided I want to have a piece of this chocolate. So I opened up the bag, ripped open the first Hershey Kiss, plopped it in my mouth, chewed and swallowed it. Next thing I know, I had eaten about 5 or 6 of them without even paying any attention. So you can see that we don't have to necessarily eat each thing or each treat as slowly and mindfully as we did in this example. But you can see how being distracted or being busy or being stressed out or being happy or sad or any of those things can cause us to mindlessly eat. And then we truly do not appreciate the food the way that we should. So I always like this quote here. Mindful eating replaces self-criticism with self-nurturing. It replaces shame with respect for your own inner wisdom. So hopefully you learned some mindful eating practices today and you're able to include them in your pattern as you continue to plan healthy meals and snacks. As always, we encourage your questions and your comments and appreciate your feedback. Thank you for joining us today, and I hope you have a great day.